So I think the societal expectations now stems into medicine, right? That's the rise of the urgent cares and stuff. Like, I don't care who I see, I need to see this now and get it fixed and get my medication because I got to go back to work. As opposed to, well, why don't I go to the doctor who knows me for so long and who can figure out, is this really a problem or not? Because there were some studies that talked about, when you went to telehealth solutions and stuff, were you overprescribed? Because of course, like if you're going in there for a drug, who's going to not give it to you if that's the quick fix?
Funny how.
Come here, though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
It's been quite busy. Just came back from France a couple of days ago, and it was a good time.
Wow, what were you doing out there? Business or pleasure?
Yeah,
or
a little
both?
vacation. No, a little vacation.
What made you pick over there? Have you been before?
I've been there a bunch of times actually. The last time I went was 2008, or 2006. So it's been a while. My wife and my kids haven't. So we were just looking at where to go for the February break and looking at deals, and got a good deal for Paris. And we said, all right, let's do it for 4 days.
Very nice. Yeah, Europe is man, it's night and day. I think last time we spoke, I think it's been over a year, right? Since maybe I had you on. Yeah.
It's been a while, yeah.
So we went to Europe. We went to Italy about 4 or 5 months ago. And yeah, just going out to Europe and like realizing, man, again, the food we'll get into and we'll talk about it, but just the experience, the people, like the ability to disconnect, like no one is, it's almost like going to New York versus Idaho. Like there's like, you're in New York, right? Like the hustle bustle. And
Correct.
that's how I felt, going into Europe. It's like when you step foot into that country, it's a totally different world. Literally. It's amazing. And then, conversely, we went from Rome and we landed in Atlanta, and you're in Atlanta. Like you the second you get off that plane, because in Italy they're like, ciao, buongiorno. They're all welcoming you into the airport. We had a little kid and they're like, oh, bambina, come see mama. And then we go to Atlanta, they're like, sir, fucking step this way. Like it's a different world. So it's cool. I'm assuming the experience in France is similar to your '08 experience, which is fantastic, or?
Yeah, I think every time I go there, it kind of blows me away again. And it's just, despite it changing so much in many ways, I think, there were no plastic forks. There was all like wooden, biodegradable, environmentally conscious. Their buses were electric. We walked 18 to 20,000 steps per day using public transit. And just in the food, right? Like you eat, like I try to avoid grains here, but I ate, I had my pain au chocolat, whatever. It doesn't, number one, you don't feel like you need to have like a gazillion to be satisfied. Number two, it's very flavorful. But number three, you don't feel bloated. You don't feel just disgusting after you eat. So you just feel cleaner, I think, in so many ways.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I don't know if you remember last time we spoke, I talked a little bit about my Crohn's. I don't really have any episodes because I'm mostly plant-based and organic, and I stay away from processed foods and dairy and all that stuff. But when I went to Italy, there was this fascinating experiment I did with myself, and I didn't tell my wife because I didn't want to worry her until afterwards, where it was like day one, we hopped in and we landed. Of course, first thing we went, because we stayed in a very cool part of Rome. My buddy lives in Rome, so he told us like where not to go, like the tourist areas. So everywhere we went, the restaurants, no one spoke English. The menus were all in Italian, right? And we walk in, I get a big plate of pasta, and I go, let me just get olive oil on it. I didn't want anything else, right? I didn't want to play around. So I was like, test one. Next morning, got a little croissant, little espresso, had a little bit of milk in the espresso. Nothing crazy. I was like, all right, let me see. I was fine. A couple hours later, I had a slice of pizza. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I'm doing good. Just so you know, I've had dairy these 2 days. And she goes, really? I go, yeah. She's like, well, let's play some more. I go, okay. This is like a little roulette. I was like, let's see. So then the next meal was dinner. I had an entire pizza, because a lot of people don't know, when you go to Italy and you order a pizza, they don't give you a slice. It's 4 slices. It's a big pizza.
Yep.
Had the whole thing to the face. Completely fine. No issues. No Crohn's attacks. Nothing. It made 0 sense to me. And for the next 2 weeks, I ate like a freaking king. Like dairy, wine, cheese, like everything. It's things that I would never dream to have here in America these last few years with my Crohn's. And it's just so interesting. The second I get back, I cook everything at home. Even the stuff I cooked at home, I felt the difference, and it was what I thought was fresh and organic. And it didn't make sense to me until this whole, election year happened, and now we're starting to get a little bit more education around the idea behind food versus Europe and America, because we always hear all the time, right? Italy's got the best food. France has the best croissant. We always hear about this stuff, and people just think maybe the chefs are good out there. No, go out there. You'll feel the difference. It's very fascinating, and now I'm obsessed with the country. Like obsessed. We're going back again this summer. Like I just can't wait to go back and check it out again. It's
cool.
So and what is your thoughts? Big reason I want to have you come back on. Obviously, I'll leave your descriptions below. But if people don't know, if you can give a quick little origin story of kind of what you do, your practice, and all that, because I want to dip into kind of the new things that have happened since last we talked.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a direct primary care doc, which basically means that we work outside of the insurance-based model. So our patients pay a flat monthly membership. And so when they seek care, there's no additional cost. So there's no barriers to care. Patients don't have to worry about, does this get applied to my deductible, or how much am I going to pay for this visit? So they can text us, email us, call us. So it's really, you pay for the relationship with the doctor. And so it's very liberating, both on the physician side and the patient side. And we're able to flex ourselves to help our patients with what they need. In terms of our philosophy, we are, at least in our practice, we are MDs, so we're medically trained allopathic doctors, but we bring in elements of functional, lifestyle, integrative medicine, genomic medicine into the way in which we care for patients. So it's not the traditional model where it's here's a pill for everything. It's, well, let's figure out what the problem is, and then let's see if we can avoid a pill, then that's the better way to do it. But if we can't, and your body isn't doing what it needs to, and we've tried different methods, then of course we use medication. So it's a very, I'd say, I don't want to say blended, but I want to say balanced philosophy where, it's trying to figure out what is the path of least harm for the problem we're trying to solve.
Which, as you're explaining it, people are like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But no doctor that people will go to have that philosophy typically. And that's what I thought was super interesting when I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Is it wasn't that route. It was more like, let's take a pill. So I think that's what most Americans are feeling. And is that when you get new patients, is that typically the response you get, where they look at you like, wait, you do what now? You actually spend more than 5 minutes with me and don't kick me out back to the lobby? Like, do you get patients that are kind of shocked by that?
Yeah, they're very surprised usually, right? Because they're so used to thinking one way about healthcare, and then all of a sudden they see this whole world and they see the value in it, right? And yes, for some patients, like, you've got your insurance and you're paying out of pocket for this, but you're paying for the experience that you're not getting in the traditional world. So I think we have patients who are very frustrated with the traditional system, but I think I also have patients who come to us for that balanced approach, right? They're not against medication, but they don't want that to be the answer for everything. And so it's really trying to think out of the box and say, well, what else can we do? Right? I had a patient with migraines the other day, and they were never taught about acupuncture. They never talked about, can we try aromatherapy? Can we do other things that don't rely on taking 2 preventive pills and, 2 abortion medications when you have a migraine? And it's not that these other solutions may not work, but you don't know unless you try them.
And that's the one thing I think as America, remind us where you're based out of again?
Connecticut,
that's right. And again, I'll leave all the information below if you want to go check out his site, guys. But yeah, I think that's the one thing with Americans that we kind of been, I don't know if it's been like, propaganda, and it's just been instilled us in decades and decades and through our parents, where we always want the quick fix. Like there's like, oh, this will help. You need to do this and you'll be fine for the rest of your life. Like, it's never like, when you get diagnosed with something, they should say, well, you could go this route and you could have medication on my work, or you could go like this healthy route where we take a look at your nutrition and your blood work, and it's going to take weeks and months for you to get the answer. And I think if people had that option, they still would probably say, nah, just give me the pill. Like, it's in the back of our head where we just don't want to take the slow route with everything. I mean, look at us idiots. We need packages in 2 days from Amazon. We can't. Even myself, I get caught where I just got a package the other day and it took a week. and it showed up, and I was like, I was about to go on Amazon customer service and be like, why did this take 5 days? And then I caught myself and I'm like, dude, it's just 5 days. It's coming from a plant like out of state. Take your time. It's all good. No, but we always want this now. Like, why do you think that is from a doctor's standpoint?
You know, I think there's a lot of it just has to do with society in general, right? We're a capitalist economy. We want high productivity. We don't want anything to go slow. We just want everything to be efficient, fast, you know, and I think we've created a culture where if we don't have it, you know, and I think there's also that dopamine serotonin hit, right? Like, oh, I got it now. Whereas I think that leads to a lot of problems, right? So the patients who typically seek care from us are patients who are willing to take a little bit of that slower route, right? To say, yes, this is probably viral, so let your body rest and heal. Yet there's a tension, right? So like, well, how many days can I take off from work? What if I lose my job? You know, because there's no job security, there's no financial stability. So everyone wants to go back to doing what they want to do, as opposed to doing what their body's telling them to do, which sometimes is take it easy. And we're all guilty of it, right?
Sure.
And I think, but part of it's what systems do we develop to create those checks and balances for ourselves? And I think so. I think the societal expectations now stems into medicine, right? That's the rise of the urgent cares and stuff. Like, I don't care who I see, I need to see this now and get it fixed and get my medication because I got to go back to work. As opposed to, well, why don't I go to the doctor who knows me for so long and who can figure out, is this really a problem or not? Because there were some studies that talked about, you know, when you went to telehealth solutions and stuff, were you overprescribed? Because of course, like if you're going in there for a drug, like who's going to not give it to you if that's the quick fix?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and also too, it's all turn and burn, right? In most of those places like ERs and things like that. I mean, there's a reason why there's a lot of restaurants and, you know, talk about Europe. It was also interesting when we sat down for like a dinner, like an expensive dinner that would normally cost a lot more in America. You sit down in Europe and you're ordering XYZ, pasta, pizza, whatever, wine. And it took forever to get the check. Like they make their rounds. They'll fill up your wine. They'll ask you for more. They'll ask you for dessert. Like they don't want you to leave, which was very weird. Versus like in America, you could spend $200 and in 30 minutes, they're trying to kick you out. You know, there's one place in particular we go to for brunch occasionally. And before you even finish ordering your meal, like if you want seconds or dessert or something like that, they already have the check waiting in a cup. They don't even tell you. They give you the check in the cup and the server leaves and you could pay, you know, with a QR code on the receipt. Like they want you to get the hell out of there so you can have more. And that's more tips for the server and more work. And then over in Europe, it's just like, they're happy with 50 people coming in a day because even if those people spend the same amount of money, it's the experience because they appreciate the food so much and they appreciate the experience more so than the money, which is probably why they're a broke country. But it makes you kind of understand like what really is important in life, right? Like it doesn't always have to be about money. You know, having the experience and having the people and getting to know people is a lot more important than the turn and burn aspect. And same thing, obviously, I would imagine in your field where you get more bang for your buck, so to speak, than, you know, working for insurance companies and getting that money versus actually working with the patient, because now you're talking about longevity, being with the patient forever, building a relationship. You're going to have that patient for a long time versus, again, the ER, turn and burn, urgent care type of stuff where, you know, they don't care who your name is, right? They just want you in and out.
You know, I think it's also having a balance of both, right? Because, for example, like there are patients who sometimes like you're sick, you need to be seen. So,
Sure.
You know, but it's also about like, do I really need to see you in person, or can I deal with this through telehealth, or can you text me with a picture of your rash so I can try to figure it out? So I think it's really a blended model, right? Where you basically say like, I'm going to take care of this many people. I'm going to do a really good job. I'm going to be there for them when they need me urgently. But then I'm also going to be there for that long term. But you design your model by, these are my people under my wing, and that's it. I'm not going to keep looking for more or trying to get more, because then you basically become the same volume-based system, as opposed to say, here's what I want to make, here's how many people I want to take care of, so how much do I need to charge them?
Yeah. And I think that's a great attitude to look at. And, you know, for not every business can do that, I think. But it is weird when we look at the healthcare system that it's not always like that. But again, we go back to, like you said earlier, where it's not just one thing. It's society, it's the stress. It's, a lot of people typically go into ER when they're stressed out or maybe they're depressed, right? And they want some antidepressants. Like there's a lot of but why do we feel that way? Well, maybe it's because we're scrolling on our phone. Maybe it's because of our nutrition. Maybe it's because of this. Maybe it's because of that. And I think the reason why the free healthcare system works in a lot of other countries that doesn't work in America is because Americans have more stress than a lot of other civilized societies. For whatever reason, maybe there's 1,000 reasons why. And because of that, I think we look for these type of diseases and these ailments that could be solved with changing our nutrition or going outside. I mean, you look at like Seattle versus Florida. There's more depressed people in Seattle because it's rainy and gloomy all the time and they can't get out and get vitamin D and get the sun exposure that they need, that their body needs, versus like people in Florida. They're happy, they're on the beach, yada, yada, yada. But also it has a lot to do with you're able to go outside 365 days a year. That's why a lot of people in Florida are extremely happy. So I think it's just all these different things that we just feel so pressured, right, in America for whatever reason, where we're looking for these type of illnesses where it can be solved at home, right?
Well, and I think the other interesting point, right, is that there's a lot we're learning about the gut-brain axis, right? And so the question, right, is, well, is it the stress that's causing us to do this? Or is it our nutrition that's causing the microbiome of the gut to get affected, and that gut-brain connection is causing more stress? So there's a great Netflix documentary I had seen about a few months ago. I think you may have watched it. I think it's called like, Hack Your Health: Secrets of the Gut or something like that. It was a really did you watch it?
I did.
It's a very interesting documentary, right?
Amazing.
And I think there's a lot of things like, all right, so is it that, are we stressed because of our lifestyle, or is stress in part due to our gut microbiome, which is due to our food, which is due to our agricultural process, right? And so who knows? But the point is, we've got to address it from all angles and not just one.
Yeah, it is such a good documentary for people that are interested. And you just don't think of it like that. A lot of people, my food relationship has changed over the years. And I'd be interested to know, like, your patients, how you treat this. But it's I think we might have talked about this before, but the gut has been proven to be even more powerful, we think, than the brain in some instances. And it's just so fascinating, not even just the food you intake, but what lives in your gut and the microbiome and just the power that it has to just completely change how your body operates. And I know this firsthand because when I have a Crohn's attack, like, I know it's coming because everything changes. I get brain fog, I get tired, I'll break out in rashes in the same places that it has been for years. Like, I just know. And it's like my immune system is like trying to tell me, it's like, all right, dude, it's coming. It's coming. And if I don't do something quick, whether that be, I either go on a fast or I just drink a lot of water and, I just cut out everything and just kind of let it subside a little bit. If I don't do that, it gets worse and worse and piles up. And similar to how our brain works, sometimes we don't listen to our brain, like those inner thoughts where it's like, ooh, you shouldn't go down that dark alley. We always say, listen to your gut. Don't go down that alley. And so it's in the slogan. It's in the thing that we've been taught, but we don't understand how powerful the gut is. And it truly is. It's very fascinating.
Well, and I think you're also right. We live in a world where you're taught to ignore your gut, right? So for example, even as parents, sometimes you're like, let me just put the TV on so that you can eat or I can feed you while you're watching something, right? But what are you doing, right? You're basically saying, hey, I'm going to distract you with something so that you become externally focused. You ignore your body's internal gut cues of satiation, of hunger, and I'm just going to keep feeding you because I think you need this amount of food, but you're not able to tell me because you're so focused on the TV, but I'm getting my checklist done, right? So I think it's
That's true.
And even if we, think about, you go to the movies, right? Popcorn, let's keep on going, right? Like, and why, so I think there's a lot of things where as a society, we're doing things without realizing that the consequence of it is we're shutting off listening to our gut in so many ways.
So true. Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't even, the popcorn and the movie analogy, that's fantastic because it's so true. Like if you were to lay that out on like a table, the amount of popcorn you eat in a movie, it wouldn't make sense. Like you would say,
Right.
no, I'm never going to eat that ever. But man, you put that in a bucket, I'm done before the trailers even end. You know what I mean? Like it's so weird. Yeah, that's so true. And then so from what you are, I'm excited to talk to you about this. You don't have to tell me necessarily your belief if you don't want or ideology behind this, but I think it is an interesting shift that's happened with this election. And I'd love to kind of know your opinion on it because I think the last time we spoke, we talked a lot about sick care versus health care. And where do you see, because there's a very controversial thing that's going on. I'm personally in favor of RFK's decision. Some of his stuff, of course, not everyone's perfect, right? But I do really think he's identified a few key points. And I think some of the stuff like food dyes we've talked about before last time you were on, and all this stuff is starting to kind of shift, I think. If none of this, a lot of this doesn't get passed, that's okay. I think the conversation is getting shifted, which is exciting to me because Europe, I think, shares a same belief that we all share, which is we don't want bullshit. We don't want dyes. We don't want unhealthy stuff. And there's a lot of things that Europe does incorrectly, but there is some stuff that they do correctly, and food is one of them. And I think if we can model that behavior in some aspect, which I hope we're going down that path, I think we're in the right mindset. But it's an interesting thing from your perspective. I'd love to know, where do you even think this is going to happen? With a capitalistic society that we live in, I mean, is this even possible to get to that point where our food's going to get changed in the next 4 years or moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the food industry, I think we have a huge opportunity. I think the challenge is going to be, what is the cost of that going to be, right? And so, okay, so the manufacturing processes have to change and so on and so forth. So now if the cost is going to go higher, the manufacturing cost is going to go higher. Can people afford it? And what is that going to look like, right? So I think this whole thing is going to become, right? So the reason, or one of the reasons this food industry is thriving the way it is, it's let's make it for the cheapest amount that we can. Let's get it to as many people as we can. Let's make it addictive so that they just keep wanting more. And so that's why you have this mass production of low quality product. And no one cares because, well, not no one cares, but a lot of people don't care because they just want it cheap. So I think when you're beginning to revamp an industry and you begin to say, let's make this a better quality, then you've got to answer the question, can people afford it? And what happens for people who can't afford it? And I think that piece of the conversation, I don't know what it's going to look like, right? I don't know enough about the industry to say, okay, let's say you remove this. Like, actually, it's funny because I bought cereal in Europe, and I was going through and like looking at their ingredients, and I'm like, wow. So number one, it was tasty. Number two, it didn't make you just keep wanting more. It satisfied you, but you didn't like want more, and it was all clean stuff, right? So to make something like that, can the average American afford it? And if not, what needs to happen for that to happen, right? So I do agree. I think there has to be a food revolution. I think there's a lot that we've learned. I think, understanding gut microbiome and the implications of it has to be in the medical realm. I'm not a complete expert by any means, but I'm learning. And so, right, so the way I work with my patients this year is different than 2 years ago because my knowledge base, and I actually recently got my own gut microbiome tested to sort of like look at what that looks like. So the things that we're able to offer and evaluate for our patients is going to be different, but it's going to also come down to what's the cost.
Yeah, I think you're right for sure. I mean, the fact that red dye number 3 is banned already, I think that's a great step for sure. It's more frustrating, I think, because you're right. Things do get more expensive, especially even now. I mean, organic versus non-organic, which is super interesting. The fact that we even have those things, because again, I keep comparing to Europe. It's almost like I'm European, but when you go over to Europe, there is no organic versus non. It's just all organic. It's just all food. Like there's no sections of like healthier for you sections. No, it's just all healthier for you. So, but we always have these sections. And I think we did that because originally there was good intentions. Oh, let's make this affordable. And we can make a lot of it. And we have to feed 330 million people. So, we have to do that correctly, right? So we have to spray pesticides on crops to make them steroid up so we can yield more potatoes and corn and etc. So I think it was in good conscience to do this right, but now we're understanding the side effects of it. And I think people are so stuck in the mindset of like, well, we're American. We could do whatever we want. I don't want you to remove that. We're just we'd rather have more food. We'd rather have more XYZ, because people want that long, they don't focus too much on the long-term aspect. They want that short-term fix, right? Like we're talking about. They want the Amazon packages in 2 days. They want the fast food right away. Like if someone told me that we're going to have to cut that stuff out and not have fast food chains anymore, I think the vast majority of the population would be very angry with that. But that would be the right route for us to go, is to start eliminating processed foods and fast foods. But you can't tell an American that. Got to drink my beer and have my fast food, right? So,
well, the funniest part is we were in Paris last week, right? I was telling you, and then we were at a street, crepe stand, and
sure.
so we're talking to the guy. We're getting our like crepes and everything, and then there was a couple that came by and asked him where the McDonald's was, and it was just the funniest thing. And the guy was like, he's like floored, and he's just like, "Here I am making fresh crepes, and you want to go have McDonald's?" And it was just. It was just wild, but it makes you like, you're like, wow, like this is the world.
That is true. Yeah, same thing happened to us in Rome, actually, similar, because I don't know if you know, but Rome has a very nice McDonald's. And obviously I haven't had McDonald's in, 20 years. But the fact that we walked by it, because there was a really good gelato place apparently that was near it, so we walked to it and we saw this massive McDonald's, like pillars, and it looked like a Coliseum. It was beautiful. And we walked past it and it was busy as shit. And we look at it, we go, how the hell is this place busy? We just had some of the best pizza in our life. We're about to walk to this amazing gelato place that has like 5 stars from the best gelato. Like, how do people go to McDonald's? And I think it just goes back to just routines, right? We're just used to eating fast food and chain. And even when you go out to these different countries, people can't even appreciate the food anymore. Like I love the Italians, the way they drink espresso. Because if you were to put these two videos side by side, like an American drinking espresso and an Italian, it's so funny because they have espresso bars where you order your espresso and you stand and just sip.
Yep.
And it's so weird for people to, like I told some of my buddies that, it's so weird for them to understand. They're like, wait, they don't like do a shot and walk away and go about their day? No, I was like, no, dude, sometimes they'll stand there for 30 minutes and just have a conversation. It's 3 sips of a drink. And that mindset is just so appealing to me. I think once you go to Europe and you see it and you experience it, it's very difficult. I don't know if it was for you. You've been to Europe before. This was my first time. But it was very difficult for me the first couple of days to kind of get used to that slowing down. My wife had to check me a couple times. We purposely didn't have a routine set up or like any tours or anything the first couple of days. We just wanted to walk around. But just walking around, I started walking fast, with my daughter. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, whoa, you want to go see this place? She's like, we got 2 weeks. We're fine. I was like, okay. So she had to kind of pry the American out of me because it's very different over there. They appreciate different things.
Well, and I think it's also being more in the moment, right? So when you're sipping that espresso, you're getting the same concept, right? You're getting the feedback. What was it taste like? What's the right? You enjoy the experience of the espresso as opposed to the espresso as a caffeine drug to get the next thing done, right? When you just have a shot of something, you're not enjoying it. It's a drug. You're basically or like when we have our big like cups of, I'm on my 3rd big thing of coffee. Who drinks it like, coffee in Europe? No, you got a little thing like this. You like take your time, and it's funny because my wife loves coffee and she had just an espresso there and she never realized how tasty an espresso is, but she'd never do that here because I feel like somehow it doesn't taste as good, right? But in Europe, once again, but it's also that going back to the awareness of our body. And I think the other thing that happens is when we do become aware in the US, we become hyper aware because you're like, oh my God, I got that mold. Is that normal? I'm feeling this pain. Is that normal? And all of a sudden you go from this existence of I'm shutting down all signals because I got to be productive and busy and yada, yada, yada. And all of a sudden I'm feeling things and I
Mm.
never felt them before. Is that normal? And then that creates anxiety because you're like, oh my God, like, am I falling apart? I can't fall apart because I got to be productive. So
Yeah.
we create this vicious cycle. Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of knee pain, like it's not the end of the world as long as you can,
Right.
you figure out ways to go through it, right? Okay, let's do our yoga, let's do our stretches. But of course, we want the quick fix.
Yeah. And it's all that preventative stuff too we're talking about, right? Like I think there's, if like I don't know if you could speak to this, but I'm sure there's some pillar or pillars of how you should be living your life, especially once you hit 30. Like personally, my pillars are just I do my cold plunge, I do my sauna, and I do my strength training. And of course I walk. But those are the four pillars I have to do every day. And I just feel better. Right. And I talk to a lot of people that are in my same age group and they do have a lot of injuries and, they can't lift up heavy stuff and they can't build furniture for, their kids because they haven't done these pillars in their 20s and 30s. So now here they are in their 40s and they're struggling. And I think we underestimate the power of lifting things up and putting them down, right? The power of yoga, as you mentioned, stretching is huge. That's one thing I'm trying to get a lot more into. I see a couple of documentaries and it kind of terrifies me. So I'm like, the power of stretching before and after workout, and even the days you're not working out, like just waking up in the morning and stretching before just hopping up and sitting on your chair and open up the laptop. Like there is power in that stuff. I mean, is there anything you could speak to in terms of like certain steps that people can take just at home? Is there anything that you would like? What are your have tos, your musts that you focus on?
Yeah, I think that's hard because everyone's goals are different, right? And
Hmm.
so I think so much of at least what I try to do with patients is to figure out like what are your goals, right? So I have patients who are like, "Hey doc, I want to die at 90 while I'm in the CrossFit gym," and I have other patients who are like, "When I go, I go." So I think that there's this number one, the have tos have to come from the person.
Mm.
It can't be me, the doctor, telling you got to do this, you got to do it, because then you're like, well, why am I doing this? So you've got to make it meaningful to you. So
Mm.
I think the first place is figure out like what is meaningful to someone. What do they want from their life, right? And I think that's the place to start, and then you begin to weave some of these things in, right? So cold plunging, I think, is fascinating. Do I do it all? Do I do it regularly? No.
Mm.
Do I wish I could do it? Yes. But it's I got 3 kids. It's not in my routine right now. So,
Of course.
but do I commend people who do it? Absolutely. And so I think there's a lot of things that are also, how do you instill that early on, right? So my wife and I are discussing like with our kids, like how do we begin to change their eating habits? Because there's certain things like, we grew up thinking, right, immigrant family, like, oh, like cereal for breakfast, cereal for dinner, cereal for snacks, cereal is cool no matter what you do. And
Yeah.
there's a part of me that's like, I wish I never had that, because that's hard to get over. Because to this day, like, I love cereal. Do I have it? No. But
Yeah.
that
Right.
that mindset begins to be shaped so early on. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of this with, I think parents especially, it's what do you want your kids to have that you didn't have before, but how do you do it in a way that doesn't judge food, right? In that good or bad, but it's, here's the nutritional value of this, here's the nutritional value of this. What do you feel like feeding your body at the moment right now, right?
Right.
And it's okay to say, you know what, I just want something that just makes me feel good right now. Cool. But you did it with intention. You understood why you were doing it,
That's
and
right.
you know that that's not sustainable.
That's right. That's such a great point. Yeah, that is one thing I've realized with food is it's got to be sustainable. Because as strict as you want to get, that's fine, but you also want to enjoy life. There is a lot of good things to eat out there, and you want to be able to do it. And I think that's why you kind of have to like juggle that nutrition, eating right versus some sort of extracurricular activity that's not just sitting at the desk. And I think that it becomes even more difficult because when you get infatuated with technology and your phone and all that, it takes away the important things in life, which is maybe that's just walking with the family. The one thing I realized with having a daughter now, last time we spoke, I think she was only a couple months old, but now she's a year and a half and she's sprinting and she's saying words and she's like, pointing things out when we walk around. She's like, Dad, look. It's like before I used to be on my phone and I'm like, let me get some work done as I'm getting vitamin D and I'm doing the right thing because I'm getting my steps in. I'm out getting sun, but I'm also doing a little work because I like money and I want to buy things. But now I'm like, when she walks or runs and we're outside, like my phone isn't even with me. I got my Apple Watch and I don't even need my phone. It's at the house. And I just watch her point at a tree and just be amazed for 30 seconds. And then she looks at a bird flying by and she's like, seeing an alien. It's like that type of appreciation I'm so envious of, because I'm never going to feel that way again. You know, we all were there at some point, of course. We were all kids. But the way kids look at things, and they're so innocent. And then something happens where either parents or friends fuck them up, because there's such balls of just energy and love, and it's just amazing to watch them grow up and watch them look at things. And I just wish I had the appreciation for that, because sometimes when I am caught in my routine of like plunging or working out or whatever, I always get caught up. There's like that little voice that says, dude, you got to get to work. Hey man, you got to save up, 401k benefits. You got to, there's car payment, you got mortgage. Like there's always that little thing. And I just, not that we can get away from that, but I think we've dug ourselves into this hole of thinking like that. To your point with the cereal, it's like those routines where it's hard to get out of it. And there's not a whole lot we could do, once you're in it.
I think that it comes down to desire versus contentment, right? And I think that's really the piece, is at what point do you say, I'm content? You may not be elated, but you're content, right? And I think that as a society, we're so fascinated with the extreme thinking, right? Passion for everything, elation for everything, that contentment isn't good enough, right? But I think oftentimes contentment is where you say, I draw the line. I am choosing not to go beyond, because if I go beyond, what I lose is not worth what I gain, right? And that's kind of where I think a lot of us, we begin to struggle, right? We're a capitalist economy, right? A little bit of extra work, a little more money, a little more marketing, a little more this, a little more that, versus let me pause and let me just be still and appreciate what I have around me. And that's hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, especially when, again, we go back to social media. I think that's the thing, is we are just so infatuated with the technology aspect of it, but we just want what other people have. And there's just so much cool stuff out there. It's so hard to do it. Like, again, I go back to Italy. It's almost like this podcast is sponsored by Europe. It's not, I swear to God, guys. But when you go and you have these conversations with these locals and you start talking about like American things, they have obviously no idea, but like they don't even watch TV. They are like out doing things, and they're, raising kids outside, and they have farms, and they, do everything themselves. And it's just, they build furniture, and they do all these things. And it's not like they're a rich country, of course, but they do see riches as something besides money. And that is something that I'm really trying to get better at, which is you don't need all the new things. You're going to find things on the internet. It's going to be great and you're going to want it, but you don't need that stuff. Everything ends up in a landfill. Everything does. There's a great bit, I think Jerry Seinfeld said it, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he said, if you buy this shirt, it's going to end up in a landfill at some point. But it's going to have these stages where you're going to love it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's going to sit in your closet for the next 2 years. Then it's going to go to your attic in a tote. And then eventually you're going to drop it off at Goodwill. And then eventually that person for 2 years is going to love it. And then it's going to end up in their closet. And then eventually it's going to end up in a landfill. And you're going to do that constantly with everything, with furniture, with toys, with all that stuff. And at the end of your life, you're not going to have any of this stuff. And you're filling this void with these little pieces of materialistic bullshit that don't matter. And during this process, you're wasting money and time focusing on this, when you should be just focusing on, the most important things, which is family, life, health, things like that. And I'm really trying to do that. I recently cleaned out my entire closet. I'm trying to go minimal, because it's hard to have all these things, and you're getting infatuated with all this stuff. And once you're in it and you're in so deep, and you look around and you're like, wow, if I didn't spend money on all this stuff, I'd have so much money. I could probably retire early if I just didn't. If I didn't spend all this money. But this is the world we live in.
I think the hard part, right, is knowing I want it, but just because I want it doesn't mean I should have it. And that's, I think, what we're trying to, at least we're trying to teach our kids, but also like doing it yourself, right? It's like, oh, let me just click that button on Amazon and buy it. It's like, well, do I really need it? But I think that
Yeah.
mindset has to be applied to everything. Oh, I see that cookie. I really want it. Should I have it? I don't know. Let me listen to my body, right? And so I think
Right.
the theme where there's so much of is that how do we take that moment to decide actively, do I follow this path or do I not? And what values and thoughts am I going to use to make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great call. Yeah, and it even reminded me of a quote from Marcus Aurelius. I had to pull this up. I don't know if you see his book, but he has like this amazing book where he just pretty much it's notes. It's all of his notes that he just. But it's fascinating to see that book, and humans have been the same for thousands of years. Like he was annoyed by humans walking around. I think it's called Meditations, if I remember correctly. But this quote about contentment, he says, "Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life." And that was true thousands of years ago, and it's true today, to where you don't need a whole lot. And I think when you can go back to it, especially when you have like a health scare like I have, and if you have family that have dealt with issues, you start to really understand that health is pretty damn important. And as long as you and your family is healthy, man, not a lot matters. The rest is just noise.
Correct. And
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, for what it's worth, I think that we do many great things as a country.
Mm.
There's things that we do terribly, and unfortunately, I think that there's parts of the world that are really looking at the things that we do terribly, and it looks so glamorous, and that they're trying to copy it. So you just see this happening, right? Look at certain things happening in India, and I'm like, oh god, they're headed the same way with insurance. And then like you're already hearing stories of, oh, they had insurance and they were billed more, and I'm like, you know what, this is like, so you
Yeah.
see that, unfortunately, and the things that they had, they're giving up. The things that made you healthy, they're giving up. So it's really, I think we're in an interesting place where we begin to say how much, what do we want to take that's good, and what do we want to let go that isn't healthy for us? And that's a hard thing to do when you're used to a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, especially when you look at like this country, and if you're another country and your citizens are poor, you're saying to yourself, how can I be more like America? Right. And unfortunately, America has not done the right things to become the country that we are today. We've done a lot of great things, but yeah, to your point, there is some terrible things that we have done and continue to do to citizens for the pursuit of greed and power. And a lot of countries just kind of look at us and want to be like that. And that is unfortunate because, again, I think in some aspect, it's kind of our blame as the citizens because we're feeding the fire. Like I always tell people on this podcast, especially if they don't want to eat dairy or anything like that, all you got to do is just stop drinking milk and dairy companies will go out of business or they'll change their gears. All you got to do is just stop buying houses at an expensive price and the market will drop. Stop purchasing the iPhone for $2,000 and eventually Apple will say, you know what, we should drop the price. Like we are very powerful as the consumer, but unfortunately we just cave in. And we just do whatever these companies say, and we are what drives them. And I think we're to blame a little bit for that. So we just got to be cognizant of what we're doing to our bodies and our minds because it's you only get one of these things. You only get one life. So
yeah, and I think our opinions on a lot of things are very short lived, right? You hear. For example, there was a scrubs company a few years ago that had this terrible marketing ad, and it was like, we're not going to buy, yada, 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 yada. And then all of a sudden, like, no one talks about it anymore, right? And so we're so fed with information that our passions or opinions for change are usually very short lived, I think, which is why we don't see that change sustain. But there's a few things that we seem to hold on to a little longer. So I think to your initial question of like, are we going to see change in the food industry? I'd like to think so. But, once again, we tend to be very into it for a defined period of time, and then we let it go.
We do love a good trend here in America, don't we? We like to hop on bandwagons, and then we slowly shift back and forth. Yeah. Well, I mean, your practice definitely keeps me optimistic, and hopefully a lot of people will duplicate what you're doing because as someone who has spent the bulk of his life at a doctor's office, numerous doctor's offices, and has not gotten the treatment that he eventually got himself. I do applaud you for what you do because I know it's definitely not the path that a lot of doctors choose, and I think they should. So kudos to you. And if you can, leave your site, leave your socials, all that. I'm going to leave it down below. But for people just listening, if they want to go check you out, where can they go?
Yeah, so the website is www.4elements, ELEMENTS, There will be a new site coming once we build our Vitality Institute, which is our big project for this year. So it's a whole wellness sanctuary that we'll be creating here in Connecticut. And so that's kind of the next iteration of the practice. And then obviously on social media, it's 4 Elements MD. And then my personal one is Dr. V Cares for Everyone, with cares start with a K and then 4, the number 4. So
I love it. Wow. Tell me about that facility. When's that going to be up and running?
So the renovations are underway. I'm hoping another 3 months maybe. And so it'll be really, the vision is if you take your doctor and you surround them by a bunch of wellness professionals to keep you out of the sick care system, what does that look like, right? And so we already kind of do some of that now, but in the new space, we'll be teaching people how to cook. One of our team members has a PhD in food science and food technology and nutrition, and a master's in nutrition as well. And so we'll be talking about how do you think of foods, how do you choose, how do you shop, how do you look at ingredients. We'll be doing demonstrations. We'll be doing outdoor yoga, Tai Chi. We'll have a meditation space. At some point, we'll have a gym on site with an exercise trainer doing that work. We'll obviously have our primary care, massage therapy. We'll have a mental health therapist. So really saying, like, what are all the things that someone might need, and how do we link it to your primary care, not your doctor, but your primary care experience, so that seeking care doesn't become fragmented from the other things that need to keep you well. So that's why it's called this Vitality Institute, right? So it's about how do you live well, but centered on primary care. And we'll be doing like VO2 max testing to help people understand their cardiac fitness and so on and so forth. So super excited, but that's kind of the next plan for what we're up to this year.
Man, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Well, whenever you get it up and running, if you need help filming content, or, if there's anything I could do to collab with you, I'd love to go up there and check it out. That is super fascinating. And man, that's type of stuff where I think, again, just a lot of us got to get a little bit more excited about, because, as we get older, I was talking to someone else that was a fitness coach last week on my podcast here, and she was telling some of those I didn't even think about until recently, which is you're literally working out and you're eating and you're taking care of your fitness now in your 30s and 40s and 50s for when you're 80. Like everything you put in your body is for when you're 80. And I started thinking about that a little bit more and more, especially now that I have a kid too, because the habits that I instill in her, she's going to live, in her teens and 20s living that. I think we need to think a little bit more about that as we get older, where it's like, it's all about the long-term health and what we're doing to put in. So I love that idea of Vitality. That's a fantastic idea. Well done.
Thank you.
Doctor, as always, I appreciate it. I can't believe it's at an hour already. So thanks for your time today. It's always good to catch up with you, and good luck with everything. I'll definitely be in touch with you here soon.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me.